Cinema, where we focus on a film. I'm Josh, this is Simply Cinema, and today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite story series of all time, Dune, and we're going to be ranking all 5 miniseries and films from my least favorite to my favorite. Let me know down in the comments below what you have seen, how you would rank them from your least favorite to your favorite, as we have just recently gotten Dune Part 2 in theaters. Let me know all your personal thoughts on each one of these films that you may have seen or not seen. And just going right into it, we're coming in number 5, we have Dune 1984. Now this one, I did enjoy upon the first watching a few years ago, and having read the book itself, I don't inherently enjoy it quite as much this time around, and it still has its good standing, it has its good strides that makes it a good story, but you can tell it's almost a bit like a Cliff Notes version in some ways, being cut down to only 2 hours, which I heard there's a David Lynch cut that may have been 4 hours out there that could have been much more efficient for the story that it is going for, how lengthy the book is, how much stuff is going on within the book, that unfortunately much is cut out to make the characters more fleshed out than they need to be. And while there is still a drive to this film that makes me enjoy it for certain parts because of how well the narrative is told, for how well it is adapting the story, even if at the time, some of the choice costumes don't look the best due to what they had, and some of the effects or visual background isn't so profound that it exceeds what we get today, but it is still something that really is something that I enjoy for what it is adapting from, but we have certainly gotten better films since then. And coming in number 4, we have the Dune miniseries. Now I just enjoy that this one is much longer. Going into watching all these movies for the first time, including miniseries, I expected this to be a movie in its own, but it turns out it's a miniseries and it is more deserving, being a 3-part, each one about an hour and 40 minutes each, and so the 5-hour runtime is well deserving of crafting this story in its fullest, being much more promising due to how much more it has to tell of the story adapting from it. There's a few choice decisions that make it slightly different, but due to its time, some of the CGI is a bit off, but because I enjoy the story so much, I can look past some of it, but some of the nature of how they chose to do the effects on the background, you can see the obvious layers and some choice decisions with how the vehicles look or how they're layered don't look the greatest, as well as the Fremen, when they have the blue within blue eyes, they're just lights added in the After Effects, which isn't too bothersome, but when you have certain scenes with the Fremen and they don't even add in that effect, it throws my brain off a little to where I have to notice that those are the Fremen, and even if it is obvious due to the context, due to the characters we're surrounding ourselves with, it just throws off the balance of what I have to think about more than what is shown to me when certain aspects of the effects are incomplete. And while the inherent nature of this film is more fulfilled due to its runtime, it does have some things that are lacking due to its effects. And coming in number 3, we have Children of Dune miniseries. Now, I've only read the first book of the Dune series, and so this one was a big jump going from book 1 to book 3, which was quite an interesting choice, skipping over the Dune Messiah and choosing the 3rd book as a miniseries. But generally, the story was fascinating. Maybe I have a little bit of personal bias, being unfamiliar with the story, not being able to compare what we got within the book versus what we got in the miniseries, and just generally the film flows about, and it has much better effects, even for being only 3 years after the fact that the Dune miniseries released, and it has better look for the blue within blue eyes, for the Fremen. The battles are much more executed in an interesting fashion. Paul Atreides having this character arc where he's not necessarily feeling like the Muad'Dib anymore. People are having threats thrown against him, and just exploring more into this miniseries, more into the story, focus on the children of Paul Atreides and Chani, and then showing where we get after the fact. It has become more interesting to me It may be partially due to recency bias of not being familiar with the story and being so familiar with what we got in the first book, but in general, I still enjoy the roundabout nature of the first book, that it shouldn't necessarily have too much influence that makes this newness of what I enjoy with this series to be flawed in any way of where I'm placing this, because it still has an inherent nature that has a great plot, a different roundabout way of telling its narrative 12 years after the first. But coming in number 2, we have Dune Part 1. Yes, I do really love this film. Denis Villeneuve, it's a great capture of the narrative onto the screen, being a picture-perfect look of the text brought to screen, with a few exceptions included, but generally just a perfect look of what this story ought to look like, having the updated effects that I'm not using as a bias to put as the outright front, but just knowing what the book is and seeing how well this is adapted makes this to not only be a better film, but one that I enjoyed that much more, enjoying the book and enjoying how it is translated on screen, seeing the passion integrated into this origin, into just this part 1 of this lengthy book that really is well deserving, well casted, well integrated with its technical effects. This love for cinema that Denis Villeneuve puts to the screen, it adds into all of the little details along the way, the instructions that you're learning about the culture, about the effects that they're integrating into the cinematography, and how they integrate this beloved story onto the big screen makes this for such a passionate work of art that I still love and just enjoy how they start up this book, how they start up this film. And even if it is a bit slower on its own end, it is a heavier drama that has a lot of politics and lead about way of going about all these different factions, but it is self-contained in telling its own story and bringing out the text to the screen in such a way that still makes it rewatchable, even if it's nearly 3-hour runtime. But that leaves at number 1, Dune Part 2. Yes, I am not preferring the action directly because it is action-filled over Dune Part 1, but overall, this film is great for its technical effects, the inclusions of new actors. They go harder and harder on how they bring out the performances. What this film asks for is asking much more for the actors due to the context of the narrative, due to the war that is involved, and how well they're integrating the culture of the Fremen, learning about the way of the language, about the waves of the sand, and how they integrate that on screen and teach you along the way the narrative that sucks you into the story, into the world that is Arrakis, as well as building upon some new characters, some new performances. Florence Pugh, Christopher Walken, Austin Butler, just how they play their characters and bringing in the returning cast that still delivers that much harder upon their own roles makes this be such a more significant film that, while I love Dune Part 1, this slightly edges out the film, and maybe they might flip-flop in the future. This one, as of now, just still succeeds over that film slightly for me, for the action, for the cinematography, and certain choice decisions where the color is chosen to put on screen. It speaks so much more of the emotions, not to mention the Hans Zimmer soundtrack that returns and is added so much more to the plot. The choice of black and white in some scenes, as well as vibrant colors in another scene, adds so much more to the depth of the politics of the story that integrates a chosen one narrative that Paul Atreides is still struggling to find his own grounds in maintaining what he is wanting to really bring out of himself as he finds himself, and just that much more to the film, to the narrative of this beloved book that I love and story that I love as a whole, brought to films and together. just makes Dune Part 2 my number one of the Dune movies. So that's just my ranking of the Dune movies and miniseries from my least favorite to my favorite, and I'd love to know what your take on these movies and miniseries are down in the comments below. I have full-length reviews of all of these here on my channel if you want to hear more of my thoughts, more details of these movies and miniseries. And I'd like for you to like this video, subscribe if you enjoyed it, as we go about daily uploads, talking about the love for cinema, focusing on the film, and we create a nice, lovely community here on this channel. So that's just all. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.